Fun little segment there. Didn't more got a little aggressive. Recognized the power of the position she's in. So she tried to get Michael Douglas, like, he was in her plaything. Now, going back in time, always been issues with men in powerful positions harassing people below them. Sometimes men, most of the time women. And so it's always been accepted to a certain extent that it's going to happen. So, just a little flirtation here and there or whatever. In recent years, it's gotten a little bit more serious. We start talking more about sexual harassment, particularly after the whole, was it Anita Bryant? And the whole Clarence Thomas thing, back in '91. Anita Hill, right? Anita Hill. Anita Bryant. The whole Anita Hill kind of something. We've heard a lot more about sexual harassment over the past 15 years. And as women have begun to get into more powerful positions, I know it's been like almost a joke, when men say, okay, I was sexually harassed. I might be saying, hey, what's a woman? You came on to me. You told me you didn't want that. A lot of times people look at men like, okay, a lot of times men will not complain, but that's just a reason. Now I'm going to tell you from my own experiences. Being in an organization where there are women that have, higher up than me, I don't want to say I was necessarily sexually harassed, but I've had things said to me. I've had my butt slapped a couple times, all in jest, playing around, But I didn't take it that seriously, but if I wanted to, I easily could. And that's a whole perspective that, changes with different people. So all depends. But as we are moving, into the future, and we do have more women in positions of power, do you think you're going to see more situations like this where there are women being accused of sexual harassment the same way that they are? And if that is the case, why does that happen? Or why will that happen?
Can I just say that there is a big difference between aggressive and crazy?
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, yeah, but I know a lot of women who are crazy aggressive. I know a lot of women who are crazy aggressive. Just because they feel like men do it all the time, so why shouldn't I try to go and get mine? And they are literally crazy aggressive, and I look at them and tell them you're crazy. And a lot of times that spills over into the workforce. My job situation is a little strange right now because I'm employed by one place, but I'm working somewhere else. So I'm doing a detail somewhere else. But at my regular job, I've seen some things where it's like that's not a suspect. And you see women and you see men too, of course. But you see just individuals going around and grabbing people and stroking, and it's like, do you know where you work? And the words that come out of their mouth is just, do you know that you're at work? And no one seems to look at these people, and I don't think people take it as seriously when women do it just because, part of it is, well, the men's going to want it anyway, and I think a lot of times whenever a man rejects sex from a woman, it is a huge ego shot. And so a lot of times they will get more aggressive, they will get more angry, but that doesn't necessarily excuse it. And I think most women recognize that it's crazy. So it's not like all women hear something like, oh yeah, well, she kind of protect her. Yeah, she's crazy. They just know.
Anybody else? Thoughts about that? Are there going to be, more cases like this? Why is this behavior even, why are we even portraying this behavior? Where we're coming from a situation where people always say that women are more docile than men. And then also the whole piece about, men always want sex with women. So when a woman is being aggressive, it's But like I said, we have always had this history or this thought in our culture that women are going outside and they're less aggressive than men are. But there are situations where women can be just as aggressive as or as assertive as. Where does that come from? Where does that behavior come from? No, I'm saying in the workplace. For years women have complained about men, being aggressive and being sexually, harassing.
Learn, but once you're in control and you're in a position of power, different types of behavior come, start to materialize. I guess it comes with the territory, but I don't think that you'll see an increase in the number of cases against women as you did with men, women against men, because I just don't think that, not that it didn't happen, but I don't think men would report it. Just because of the way that they would be perceived. I think, of course, there are some men who will because, they just know right's right and wrong's wrong, so, I'm going to report this. But I think for the most part, men will not report that.
I think a lot of it also has to do with chemistry. Now you can say that it's a female boss in a higher position who's harassing, the male or whatever. But I also think it has a lot to do with chemistry and the fact that, for the most part, especially if she's single and he's single, there's just more to it than the fact that she's dominating him or whatever. I firmly believe it has a lot to do with chemistry. Because if I didn't like you, I didn't like you. I don't care whether I'm your boss or not. If I don't like you, well, I'm just like a person, if I don't like you, you want to know I don't like you. So we can just cut to the chase right there. But even if I was your boss and I didn't care for you, I would probably only look at you when I had to talk to you. When I hadn't talked to you, I probably wouldn't have a lot of interaction with you. If it was someone that I felt a chemistry with, then probably so. And at some point, I probably would. But like Tammy said, really, are you going to report it? You want to talk about it with your boys, but you're not going to go tell the labor department or whoever it is that you need to tell. You're just not, because that's just not what you do. When you're going to talk about it on Monday Night Football, some beer with your boys, and it's going to be like a strike in your belt. So now, like if it were the other way around, then of course, but I don't think it would escalate to that. Look, what's her name? What's the girl's name? No, Bill Clinton. Look what she did. The two of them were reporting. Right, that's what I'm saying. So just kind of look at it. And I think that was very impressive. Really not. But yeah, she was very aggressive. But I also think she had a role, which never came to the forefront. But there's a whole lot of things that come into play, I think, to get a situation like the one that was in the school. And I'm sure it happens on maybe a smaller scale or whatever, but there's a lot of things that come into play. I don't think it just happens. And I think chemistry is probably the biggest number one.
Let's move away from the harassing part, focus more so on the aggressive nature of the workplace and moving higher up in certain positions. The question I asked you before to the break was, how do you change, or how have you seen people change as they have moved up the ranks? People who've known who were very pleasant and fun, and all of a sudden, as they got into different positions or a higher position, their personality changed along with that position.
A lot of times when male or female, but we're going to talk about female, get in these positions, sometimes you just can't be.
I mean, as much as you want to still go to lunch with your girlfriends and whatever, a lot of times you just can't. I mean, it's a problem, you know, and then you got a hobnob with the powers to be, and, you know, if you don't, then, you know, they frown upon that, and then it trickles down into your work performance. So, not that you don't want to, or not that she doesn't want to, it just doesn't go like that. It really doesn't. And it's sad, but it's the truth. Men somehow can still do it to a degree, not but to a degree. But women, you really, and I've seen it happen. You really have to change your whole, your whole MO, your whole persona. You know, and it's sad. It really is, because now you got to go out with the CEO and his wife, and little Johnny, and y'all got to go to the play dates together and all that. I mean, if you don't, it's just one more thing, one more reason. Because they start the list, they move into the position. They start the list. So when it's time for your review, and they got to give up some more money, you've been doing all this stuff wrong for like 6 months to 9 months, and then suddenly now it's an issue. So, you want to, most women want to, but you really can't.
So are we saying that because of, when we get to your question, are we saying that because of the position that you're taking on and you're moving up the ranks, that you're basically being trained to carry yourself in a different way in order to fit in? Like, now all of a sudden you're trying to get to the all-male club, so you have to start taking on all-male characteristics in order to actually fit in order to be approved of. Is that what we're seeing? But then go ahead.
I think your point is interesting. I've had the experience of working with all men and with all women, and supervising all men and all women. Being a young person supervised, and I'm just speaking from my own personal experiences, being a young person supervising older people and older men, you have to assert yourself a great deal. Because not only do they see you as a woman, they see you as a young girl. So you have to sort of go over and above everything that you would have normally done just to be respected as a colleague, as an equal, let alone supervisor. And so all of the things that go along with being a woman, all of the social things that go along with being a woman, or how people look at you as being, unassertive, soft, demure, as a supervisor, I felt that those things have been put on me, and I've had to not be those things just to supervise somebody. You know what I mean? Just to supervise somebody, I have to not be all of the things that you've already put on me coming through the door as a woman, a young woman. So, do I have to put on a suit and, a hat and smoke a cigar? No, I don't have to do those things, but I definitely feel, I'm sorry? No, because I think that that's an extreme. But I definitely can't be all of the things that I feel like naturally I should be able to be just to be a woman. I can't, yeah. So, and it's a lot more difficult supervising, I find, as a woman, supervising older people as opposed to supervising men. Because they just have no respect for you just because you're a child. And I know more than you, and who do you think you are? And just because you went to school don't mean that blah, 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 And so that's the challenging part. I would feel like as a young person, I have to assert myself even more versus being a woman.
I think that one of the main issues is about power, like the pursuit of power, regardless of whether it's a man or woman that's pursuing that position. I think that goes back to what we were talking about. Does it cause people to change? And a lot of times when people get into that position of, or that goal of pursuing that powerful position, it can cause you to make choices you normally would not make. And I think that's what happens most time. Men just happen to be the ones who've always been in that, mostly in those positions. And now we see women coming to those same type of crossroads where they have to make decisions and choices. And I think we need to keep in mind the differences between men and women. You know, when men, you know, tend to be more aggressive and dominant, and that's fine. That's usually a male character trait. And women, you know, the way we wielded power, despite the fact that we haven't been put in these positions, is through our sexuality. You know, we've been able to, you know, be in control of our men without them even knowing it because of how we do what we do. And so when you have a woman here, like Demi Moore here, she gets into this position of power. She knows what works for her. She knows the different things that she has to do to get to where she is. And you know, you have to adapt to your environment. If you're in the type of company she's in, she knows what she has to do. She has to use her sexuality. She has to continue to play the man's game, even though she may be smarter than them or may have a different, you know, plan ahead of herself. Whereas if you're in an all-women company, there's a different way you need to be for that pursuit of power and role. So I think that's what the main difference is. And in doing that, you recognize, just like she said, it's about you have to gain the respect of whomever it is you're working with. So you do what's necessary to do that if your ultimate goal is power in that position you're seeking.
Right on. Now, as I say this, I don't want to insult anyone in the process that they went through, so I don't take it as such. But I remember years ago talking to people in different, you know, fraternities and sororities. And, you know, we all know within, you know, HBCUs and National Panhandle and, you know, black fraternities and sororities that pledging is, of course, illegal. So you have these underground lines that go on. And I remember talking to people who've gone through that process and them being angry with people who did not go through the same process, people who, quote unquote, you know, signing papers and quote unquote skating. And saying that those people who went through that process as opposed to going through the underground line, when they actually go and try and pledge the underground line, they tend to go overboard because they didn't go through that same process. They don't know when to ease up and when to step back and when to not do certain things because they just aren't familiar with that. They just kind of go overboard. They weren't trained to actually pledge something. And I say that because, like you guys said, you know, it's not always within a woman's nature to be as aggressive and as assertive as you have to be as you move up into professional ranks within, you know, a certain organization. And so when you do get into positions of power, do you find that certain women, because they weren't, that's not their nature, and they, you know, they had a short window of time where they're forced to take on these characteristics, that they kind of go overboard with those characteristics? It's like almost magnified because it goes beyond who they normally are to a whole nother, you know, person. They don't really have control over. They haven't been taught to control those personality traits. Do you find that happen?
First of all, I want to give you a dabs from over here about recognizing the differences between men and women, because that's important when you talk about human interaction. That men and women are fundamentally different. What we think and what we do, very, very different. I don't think that women go overboard. I think that the behavior of someone who is responsible for other people and the things that go along with that are not inherent of characteristics of women. And in this country, in this world, on this earth, men have been traditional leaders. And so the characteristics of men, or the characteristics of leadership, like the two have become synonymous. And women don't fall someplace in that. So once we become leaders, and we take on the characteristics of leadership, then they become synonymous with the characteristics of men. And that's where we get caught up, is that because I'm a woman, I can still lead, and I can still talk just as assertive as you, loud as you, I can still point people in the right direction, and I'm not trying to be like you, because I'm a woman, and I enjoy being a woman. I don't want to be a man. I don't like the way y'all think. But, you know, just respecting that leadership function, and that all of us have our own turns in leading. It's your turn when it's your turn. It's going to be my turn when it's my turn. But respecting that it's my turn and I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I mean, the same thing goes in relationships. I mean, I think that, you know, you can translate it onto relationships. In that because I am doing X right now doesn't mean I'm trying to take your place. It's a give and take on that key or bigger picture. You know, what are we trying to accomplish here? Whatever we're trying to accomplish, let's try to get it done together. I have strengths, you have strengths. Let me lead on my strengths, and I'll lead on you lead on yours.
Thank you, because that's exactly the point I was trying to get to. It's not always necessarily about taking on male characteristics. Like you said, it's taking on the leadership characteristics that people don't normally associate with females. So now all of a sudden that you are taking on these characteristics and people are seeing it, a lot of times people point you out as being, you know, trying to be a man or being a B because of these characteristics. But it's not even so much about trying to be anything else. It's that you are stepping into a role. You know, that you have to portray yourself in a certain way. And so it's only magnified because you are a woman. It's only magnified because people aren't used to viewing women in that way. So now this is the way that they're seeing you, and it disturbs them. They're not comfortable with that. And you get that from both men and from women. Because women start to question, you know, well, where's this coming from? They don't understand that because they haven't experienced it themselves, you know. And then men also are experienced with having women as their, you know, their supervisors a lot of times. So they're uncomfortable with the way that, you know, things function sometimes when, you know, they come off in that leadership, aggressive way. You know, but that's the point I'm trying to get to. Thank you. The last question I want to ask you, though, and this moves into the next segment, but I do want you guys to answer right now. As you are making all these changes in your professional life, as you are moving up the ranks, as you are being forced to take on these certain characteristics that may not be your normal everyday you know, personality, do you see, and this goes to your point, do you see that transferring into your personal relationships, whether it's your romantic relationships, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, do you start to see those personality traits come out when you are dealing with those people that are outside of your work environment? I'm seeing a lot of head shake, I'm seeing everything going on right here. We'll go all the way to the back.
Hello, how you doing? In a very recent past relationship, we had similar problems. Situation one was, okay, I'm 26. My mother always taught me to be independent. Always. Ever since I was a little girl, you have to learn how to do things on your own. Get up, if you fall, get up and do it yourself. So, in this new relationship, we would go to actually go to the grocery store together. And I am used to going to the grocery store myself. I was single for a while, you know, and I would go to the grocery store by myself, carry my own bags, push my own cart. And one day, after maybe we've been dating for months, you know, he would normally go and get the cart, but then I would end up pushing it. I didn't realize that I was taking the cart away from him. I didn't realize that when I picked up the milk and the water that was in the same bag together, I was trying to be a man. I didn't realize all of these ridiculous, you know, notions that he was trying to make. So whenever I had to actually make a conscious effort not to touch the cart. Like it was, and I realized that was hard for me because I was so used to just doing it on my own. I would go to the grocery store every week on my own, carry them on the bus or my car on my own, take them into the house on my own. I didn't have a man there. So when this relationship, you know, came about, I had to kind of readjust the way I did things. You know, I would put the groceries away at home by myself. Then now this relationship, he actually got an attitude with me in the grocery store in front of the cashier that just so happened to be a very dominant-looking lesbian, okay? And was just like, you always trying to be a boy. You always trying to be a man. I was like, what are you talking about? And then suddenly this girl is looking at me like, and I was just kind of like, let's talk about this later. He wanted to talk about it then and embarrass me. And, you know, we actually got into a huge fight over me pushing the cart, taking in the heavy bags. Why can't you just be a lady and take the lighter bags, the tissue bag? Anyway, yes, so that was one of my many experiences in that relationship where I was just used to being independent, and something so trivial to me became something so huge to him. So, yeah.
Only thing I'll say is, after being married 35 years, a woman's always doing everything anyhow. So, what the hell? Now that I'm pushing 71 and I survived a seizure about a week ago, now I have this attitude, my cracky, I'm going to do what I want when I want. I don't give a hoot nanny hoot on my own. And it isn't because I want the man to do all the hard work. I figure, what the heck, if I'm going to drop dead soon, I'm going to do what I want when I want, but I'm going to do it in a loving way. And I'm going to say, look, whether I live to tomorrow morning or not, let me do this man's work out in the yard. And I always like working in the yard. Maybe I should have been a man, I don't know. I've got a little tomboy in me, but I'm not a lesbian. I'm a lady. And as far as me making the pass with a man, if I got a chemistry towards him, I'm not going to rape him, but I'm going to let him know I'd love to go to bed with him. And I'm not ashamed of it. Of course, I'm not going to tell my husband about it either, or my son. But what the hell, you only live once. If I can't express how I feel, it's the chemistry there. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm shocked, but I'm not ashamed. And I guess I love the guy as a friend. I'll probably never rock in the bed with him. But by cracky, I sure can think about it. That sounds aggressive, but that's reality looking at. Okay? So what I'll do, I'll write a poem, and I'll put all that stuff in the poem. And I probably won't even say what I'm really thinking in my head. I'll probably be too shy to put it in the poem. But at least I told the person how I feel. I didn't say no more. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag, totally.
Anybody else?
I would like to say that, I mean, the fact that women or people perceive us as taking on a male-dominant role in these type of positions, yeah. And in terms of it coming home, it probably happens because, you know, like, really, what are you doing? I mean, you know, you need, men always say, they want to independent woman, yada. But when I start being independent, they can't handle it. You know what? I'm telling you what to do because guess what? You don't know what to do. So therefore, I'm telling you what to do. And that doesn't mean that I think you're less than a man. It just means that you need me to tell you to do this and I'm telling you what to do. That has nothing to do with what I do at work. It really doesn't. But then, on the other hand, you said you like me because of who I am. Okay, well then, you know what? I'm the CEO of the company. That's who I am some of the time. And then when I'm here, I'm who I am here. So you know, you gotta kind of figure out what you want me to be. And I can create a balance. But the minute you start falling off, then I'm going to get a little aggressive. But you truthfully like it. You don't want to tell me that truthfully, that's really what you like. You know, so it kind of gets mixed up. And it does filter in. But you know what? Man up.
We're gonna go to one guy, and then we have to go on to the next segment. We are going to run out of time. If you'd like to make a hop over here.
I think a lot of these issues could be, I guess, avoided if there's some sort of discussion about gender roles. You know, and I think that no matter what relationship you're in, you know, I think there should be some sort of discussion in terms of like roles and expectations. I know that sometimes with me, because I have to make some decisions on my job, the last thing I want to do when I come home to decide where we're going to go to dinner, or what about we do that night or that weekend, because everyone's coming to me all day at work, you know, 40, 50 hours a week, asking me to make decisions. So when I go home, you know, they pick it up. You make the decision, you know. But I think that if there's like other communication between, I guess, both people in a relationship and say, hey, I had to do all day, can you do this or whatever? You know, I wouldn't want to be sliding, oh, he can't pick up where we eat for dinner, you know. I would want, or there's, you know, I guess I kind of expect, if I'm in a relationship with someone, I would expect that person to be sort of in tune to what's going on in my life. I think it's realistic. I really do. Because if we're sharing a space, you know, I should, if your mood changes or something doesn't seem right, and you have your routine, and, you know, I should be saying, hey, is everything all right? Or normally this is what you do, or, you know, you're not going to the gym, or, you know, you didn't offer to do this, or now you're doing this more than what you were before. I think that's your duty when you're in a relationship, to get to the person, to talk about these things. I don't think that sometimes we get so wrapped up with our jobs or with our, you know, workout regimens or whatever it is that we do on the side, you know, that we kind of neglect the person. That's when we have all these like blow ups, whatever. That's it.
I mean, we can do whatever. I mean, if we're flowing here, we can flow. We don't have to go on to the next segment.
This is it. Thank you. I'm glad that you said what you said about the gender roles, but if I could just add one thing to it, which is, first you gotta be honest about the gender role expectation. No. Not whether or not the sex roles or gender roles are realistic, but you have to be honest with yourself about what you want in your relationship as it relates to the interaction between you as a woman and you as a man, right? I know I'm very, very independent, incredibly independent, to a fault, okay? But I'm telling you, I want nothing more than when I do have a person in my life to be incredibly submissive. That's just how I am. So I stand and run meetings all day and tell people what to do and blah, blah, blah. But when I come home, I'm going to cook you dinner. I'm going to cook you dinner. What do you want? That's me. But see, what happens is some women and men aren't honest about that, what they want, that they want to do that for their man, or that they want to do that for their woman. And so you get into a relationship and you're at a crossroad because you don't know what it is that you want to do. I kind of want to do this, but then I don't know that I'm this and that. And so you get into a struggle, there's a conflict that goes on in you between what you want to do and what you think you should do. So when you come to a relationship, you have to be honest about what you want as a woman from it. And then it's okay to be everything that people think you're supposed to be as a woman, or everything that you think you're supposed to be as a man. If you don't feel like you can fulfill that role, then be honest about that. That you don't feel like rubbing your man's back because that ain't what I'm going to do. Not, I don't want to do it because I'm not supposed to do it, or I don't want to be looked at as being weak for doing it. And last week, and I'm stopping. Last week I said, and I tell all of my female friends this, I don't judge you because only you know what you do at night when it's dark in the confines of your own home, underneath your covers,